Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the main event, the history of the Champions League. I am Martin Ramsey in the chair, as I have been for the last 35 weeks. You should probably know my name by now. And I'm joined, as always, by my two friends and colleagues, Adam Thornton. Good evening. How are we doing?
35 weeks is insane when you think we've only covered, 13 seasons? It's mad. Again, a really interesting, I was going to say week, but a really interesting couple of weeks covering this one. Just not getting any dead seasons. Even that one a couple of years ago with the Italian Champions League final that wasn't great. Even the lead up to it was interesting. It's just hit after hit, and long may it continue. So yeah, another fun one. Couple interesting teams, couple underdogs coming to the fore. And yeah, Barcelona, doing it, and the first time in first time in the Champions League, isn't it?
First time in the Champions League, they featured in our preface or prologue, whatever that first episode was, winning the old Champions Cup. The embryonic Champions Cup, as I like to often say. And David Edgar's here as well. How are we doing, David?
I'm good, thank you, lads. Got a question for you both right at the start of this season.
Right at the start, fucking hell.
Zrinjski Mostar, Punic, Neftchi, and Kairat. What do these clubs have in common that they can say about season 2005-2006 Champions League?
Pass. I'm going to pass straight off the bat, I think.
They went in at the same round as the holders.
Of course they did. Because
can you imagine? And that's only, 20 years ago?
Well, special reason, wasn't there, I suppose. Can we wind the clock back? We are doing 05-06, listeners, I should have said right from the off this week. And we're starting, as always, with the group stage. Can we wind back then just a little bit into that previous season then, Davey? Because there's a lot of chat. If Liverpool win this, they're nowhere near the top four. Everton are looking like they're going to get fourth place. Are England going to be allowed 5 teams? This seems excessive, even for this expanded Champions League era. And this was the compromise, effectively.
Yes, it was that Liverpool could go into it, but would have to go through from the very first qualifying round. And the teams I've mentioned there, I'm not being unfair. I wasn't picking at the smallest. Other teams include Glentoran, Gorica, Tirana, Skontoriga, Tbilisi. It really was the very first, the smaller countries. There's Maltese sides in there, there's League of Ireland sides, there's Welsh. Liverpool would play TNS actually in the opening round. I personally think, and of course it has been changed, the holders should have the right to defend their trophy. And I think that, especially given that it now runs as a separate, almost a separate league. That's what we've evolved into through the weeks we've been doing it on here, that you have to be rewarded for your performance in that. It was harsh on Everton, who, if it had been any other club, they might have been a little bit more amenable to it, but given who it was. But it did change, though, when the big clubs kind of looked at it and said, well, on the off chance that we don't, because it isn't beyond belief, and we've seen it since, that huge clubs don't finish in the top 4, and that's where we've led to, I think it was the Juventus chairman, wasn't it, who said there should be a couple of wild cards given for historic teams who have won the trophy and who missed out on it. But this was the one that sparked that debate, and you're right, it wasn't sorted quickly, because it was apparent, for months before that Liverpool, well, certainly weeks before, that Liverpool were not close to finishing in the top four. So there was a lot of speculation and debate. And for a while, it did look like Liverpool were not going to be allowed in. That was certainly the initial impression that UEFA gave off, that they were not at all keen on letting Liverpool in, that their view was they haven't qualified for it, their achievement is separate. But I think that the ridiculousness of having a Champions League where the team holding the trophy weren't competing for it sort of was eventually brought home to them, and they let them in. But you could argue and say that certainly this first round Liverpool were not in any jeopardy, but you could argue that they were in jeopardy having to go through the entire thing. But it's just amazing, and to younger listeners who've maybe only been watching the Champions League for 10, 15 years, I think this must be one of the things that staggers them. And to you and I and to Adam, this feels more like the modern era to me, and yet this seems so archaic, something from long ago. But yeah, Liverpool right in. They were playing with the teams in the start of July.
Yeah, 12th of July. Man. I mean, that's for English teams. That really is kind of starting pre-season. Really, 7 weeks from Istanbul.
Yes.
Yeah, incredible. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That Juventus request floating that balloon, David, that previous winners should just basically have automatic, like the US Masters. That if you win it doesn't matter if you're not in the top echelons of golf anymore. You can just turn up anyway. The keys to the door are always yours. Blah blah blah. You've got your locker with your name on it. That wasn't about 2006-ish, was it? By any chance?
Do you know? It was, and
wow.
Was there something that happened to Juventus round about 2006? Let me think. And of course, they jumped on this Liverpool bandwagon as well. And said, "Well, you can't, historic club like Liverpool. Do we want these other clubs being in there at the expense of this?" And of course, Juve have been the prime movers over the last few years in the European Super League. It's an idea that they've clung to, but. It is an interesting parallel with other sports, Martin, and you're absolutely right to bring in, because at golf it's a life, isn't it? I understand. I mean, some of them it's 10
until
years.
You can't walk, and you can therefore you can get a ceremonial tee off basically, and that's your right. But it's there until you don't want to do that.
You stop. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw Arnold Palmer at an Open well into his dotage. Not for a while. No, it was years ago now. But And I know that some events it's 10 years, but yeah, it's an interesting parallel. I think we would all agree that the current holders have more of a right than, say, Juve, who won it a decade before. But it was a real, potential issue, which has been sorted over the years. Holders, I suppose, for 12 months, automatic now. Doesn't matter what country, doesn't affect the other four. They will do some jiggery pokery with the numbers to get you in, and I think that is fair. And of course, this was, the closest that Everton ever came, and then in the end, they didn't even make it.
Well, we'll touch on that in a minute. It's some idea, but Nottingham Forest, Hamburg, pricking their ears up. That sounds like a great idea. Gigi Bacalison, now you're onto something here, lads. Adam, we always kind of look at that those early qualifying rounds. I mean, there are some notable scalps. Celtic certainly incredible result in Bratislava against Media. 5-0. They lost that first leg. I'll be honest, I'd never seen anything remotely like that. Even our disgraces in Europe hadn't quite reached that level. They won 4-0 at Parkhead, but that was not enough, and it was probably not going to be. But Everton, it was a huge deal, right? I mean, they'd felt as a club, David, robbed in the 80s twice, really, from being champions of England and never been able to compete in the European Cup because of Heysel. And they have this third qualifying, which I think was proper. Like that's what would have happened anyway to the fourth place team. But Villarreal, Adam, it was an awkward ask. I think I remember it felt and was certainly presented as a tough hurdle, and it proved that.
Definitely did. I remember remember watching this game. That was a really good Everton team around about that time. And I guess it's one of those difficult to quantify because for me, not really being aware of Everton being good because it was the 80s or late 80s that they were decent. Seeing them in there was always difficult to judge. You didn't quite have the financial disparity with England and the top of Spain that you do now. A more recent example, I guess, would be Leicester going in. Nobody thought Leicester were going to go in and end up out bottom of the group or whatever. You just think, well, they've got enough money about them. They're going to do relatively decent. But I don't remember thinking that about Everton. I remember thinking that Everton against this Spanish team is a really strange one, and I wasn't quite sure where to place them. So I think at this point I kind of thought this was a bit of a tricky one for them. One of those that you would get as Rangers that if you kind of, it's a bit of a lose, or it's a there's not much of a gain because if you win, then well, fair enough, you should beat them anyway because we've never heard of them, and if you don't win, you're like, oh, doesn't matter if they're decent, you should beat them because we've never heard of them. So, yeah, it was a tricky one. I think but that's a really interesting grouping there when you think about it. Man United, Everton, and Liverpool all in the qualifying rounds. And obviously Liverpool had the no association restriction thing, so they could be drawn against.
They could have played them,
English teams, but the only one they could be drawn against was Chelsea because everyone else was in the same seeding pot as them, and then obviously they get Chelsea, which is one of those little quirks that I love that just comes up again and again, similar to Celtic Artmedia and then Rangers Artmedia, just these random quirks of fate that just appear. So that's a nice little one as well. But yeah, I would have been quite interested to see how Everton went. They did feel very UEFA Cup-y around about this time, but it could have been interesting, but it wasn't to be.
We'll talk a lot about Villarreal, I think it's fair to say, over the course of the next few shows. Let's get cracking then. Group A. I'll go to David because it features two teams that Adam is
and I like
talking about. Yeah, exactly. But it's probably the kind of group, David, that would start a conversation. Maybe it isn't. Maybe that conversation's already underway. We've touched on it before in the show already, but intensifies that conversation. A conversation that is still, has developed, and now we've got this massive thing that people can't quite get their head around yet. But there's no point watching this group because there's no Jeopardy. We know how it's going to work, and that's pretty much exactly what we were dealing with. Juventus, Bayern Munich, and with Club Brugge and Rapid Vienna, and it was big wins, or wins anyway, for Juve and Bayern against the other teams. They take each other 2-1, one at home, one away, each of the home teams winning 2-1, sorry. And then there's just a slight slip by Bayern in Belgium in the final game to make Juve the group winners and Bayern coast through in second place. There's just this feeling of inevitability and slightly tuning off for those millions of neutral casual viewers at home, which is what football is more and more becoming targeted at.
You've got this enormous clash, right? Juventus and Bayern Munich, and people are interested in that. But even then, there's not a tremendous amount of jeopardy in those ties. Both win their home match, and this 2-1 sort of cancels out. But they know they are going to get through, barring some sort of catastrophe. This group is almost, if you like, the perfect illustration of just what you've talked about there, of that lack of jeopardy. You have two teams who will fight it out for top spot, and that is important with the seeding. We've seen, how the draw can massively be different for you in the next round, but still, they know they're likely to go through. You then have a third place side who are much better than the fourth place side, and you have a whipping boy, and everyone has their role. Top two will fight it out. Third place team are pretty confident they'll amass enough points for the UEFA Cup. The lads, Rapid Vienna in this case, can we just have a check? And thanks very much. We've done our part. It's over for us now. And yeah, you're absolutely right that you get this match, but there's not the stakes, and you and I are big stakes people, aren't we? In
We
football,
love
I mean,
stakes of all kinds. Yeah.
yeah, of all kinds. But I will. I'll watch pretty much any football if it matters. I'd rather watch two teams, scrapping at the end of the season for fighting relegation than watch two mid-table sides who maybe are bigger names. Because there's more at stake. It matters more. It does. And this group was almost the perfect archetype of what people who were complaining about the lack of Jeopardy they were saying. They were, look at this group. Two teams are going to go through. It's just about what order. And the argument can be put forward as, well, they've still got something to play for then, haven't they? So that is legit. But equally, the key thing is qualification out of it. And both looked pretty solid in doing it. Juve, apart from a defeat to Bruges, were pretty golden in it, and 16 points. But tight. They weren't smashing sides particularly. Bayern, they had their absolute gubbing of Rapid Vienna, which was to be expected. But yeah, it did get that debate. That it's such an interesting time that we're talking with now, where the big clubs, I think probably for the first time, the novelty for the big clubs has worn off, and now they are seeing this as less of an exciting new challenge, and more now it's normalised, and they're sort of like, we should be in it. And that is when you start to get bigger clubs saying things like wild cards and do we want these. Leicester, Adam mentioned there, Leicester was a great example. It was actually used, Leicester, by AC Milan, who said, who wants to watch Leicester City in the Champions League rather than AC Milan? What's a better game? Leicester City versus, I think they used Real Madrid's example, or Real Madrid AC Milan. And as non-supporters of those clubs, we can all say, well, that's nonsense, isn't it? That's, they qualified, they thoroughly deserve to be there. You didn't. But that doesn't change the fact that these big clubs still feel that way and still sort of think, no, we should automatically be in there. And it leads us all the way back to Mr. Martin Ramsey's argument, which has been put forward a few times through this. If you want to have a Super League, just bloody have one and stop all this shadow box.
They would love it. It's the fans clearly don't. That appetite isn't quite there. Adam, yeah, Juve are going to go. They're going to go for a wee while off this show. because of chicanery. They brought Patrick Vieira, I think, that season. But both them and Munich, a couple of younger players who they're going to be around football for the next while. A young defender from Fiorentina called Chiellini, and Bayern with a young striker from Cologne, Lucas Podolski. It's nice to see kind of debuts, players just kind of getting bloodied in. You're like, Jesus, yeah, that's where you started, because you have been here non-stop for so long.
I can't imagine Chiellini as being young. Sorry, just before when you see that a young defender called Chiellini, it doesn't sound right, does it?
Shaving at 6 years old, etc.
Yeah, he probably had the same haircut as he does now. Yeah, it is. Vieira does go this summer. You're right. He does he get sent off in his debut? Is it the first game for Juventus? I can't remember. I'm sure he gets sent off in the game against Bruges. So yeah, not a great start for him. He never really. It's a funny one, that, because you can imagine that being a transfer now. Like, there's a whole host of.
You're right. His debut, Adam, first game against Bruges. I so. He was sent
there's
off.
A whole. You can imagine him going there now, because there's a whole host of aging English players that have went over to Serie A in the last 8 years or so, banging them in. You look at Napoli, and they've got half the Premier League's misfits 11 really at points, with McTominay and Lukaku and a few others kicking about. So it's a signing that you could imagine now, but at the time, I mean, Wenger didn't get much wrong in these first 10 years or so. I wonder if he might have kept Vieira a little bit longer. We're going to come on to maybe not in these shows, but certainly in the next couple of weeks, the sort of downfall of Wenger and where we think things went wrong potentially. But I just wonder if they could have done with that, because you think back, and I know Gilberto Silva is kicking about, and I would argue that he's probably more of a loss when he goes at the time, just because of everything else. But I just wonder, keeping him about might have helped. And obviously, sliding doors moment for Vieira, I'm pretty sure, given how things go in the next couple of years for Juve, I would imagine he would have liked to stay as well. He'd only just turned 29, I think he was. I think he was even 30 when he left. So yeah, it's one of those ones you think, oh, it'd have been good if Vieira was in the Arsenal team for the couple of years, how they might have managed to sort of navigate and bring in all these players with that sort of older head there. So yeah, but anyway, I'm digressing. But yeah, Juventus, I think you're right. A couple of younger players there. I hadn't realised Podolski came through at that point as well. He's still one I would have pegged as being a little bit older. But yeah, I think we're now getting to the point. I think we said a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, that first, not generation, but I don't know what you would define it as, that first era of those players who were in their peak when we started doing this show, or even the players that are still coming through. We're sort of starting to see them, and Vieira's a good example of them moving on to clubs that they might now be on the downward trend, and we'll start to see some very, very young players coming to the fore in the next 2 years. 2 years or so, yeah.
Group B, Adam, it's exactly the same. Just two well out in front, one better than the other, and two absolutely nowhere. This is Arsenal, Ajax, FC Thun from Switzerland, and Sparta Prague. Now, FC Thun were a bit of a fairy tale story. They were in Switzerland's third division, I think, in 1995 or something, and they built their way to the Champions League, and this was remarkable. And they got their pants pulled down. But listen, it needed a 92nd minute Dennis Bergkamp goal for Arsenal to beat them at Highbury on match day 1. It should be said, and they went through the UEFA Cup as well. But Arsenal, Adam, the loss of, I guess, such a talismanic figure, such a personality, such a character in that midfield. You've mentioned in Vieira. How are they shaping up in a way that leads us to Paris, effectively? Because Arsenal have been the subject of criticism consistently throughout the show as underachieving, under-delivering on what they had. What is different here? We'll come to it next week when we get to the knockout. It's not as if they got a piss easy run to that final. The semi-final might look on paper, but it's certainly not in practice. The quarterfinals and last 16 are European royalty, and they deliver, I think, in style. We'll obviously go into a lot more detail in a couple of weeks, but what's kind of changing now that it gives maybe room for optimism, because they, again, unbeaten, they draw with Ajax, I think, but that's it. They absolutely cruise through to the next round.
I think the first thing I would say, I completely agree with your point on the knockouts. Those are difficult stages. This is a really easy group, though. I think Ajax are bottom seeds, albeit second. Pot 2 of the bottom seeds. FC Thun, you mentioned, are only second bottom. Armedia Bratislava being bottom, and then Sparta Prague were bottom 3 or 4 in that group. So it's relatively straightforward, and I think that sort of plays out. But you're right, there's still a little bit in there. There's a couple of really good goals from Van Persie, I think, that kind of puts them through. And he is coming to the fore at this point, and that sort of Van Persie, Bergkamp, Henry, not 3 players that I kind of had in my head that played together, really. It sort of feels like from 2 separate generations. You had Fabregas in as well, and it sort of feels like one of those 7 steps on Wikipedia type things. You're like, did you know that Dennis Bergkamp played with Robin van Persie, and then 20 years later this person played with Robin van Persie? It seems like it's from a bygone age. I have to admit, maybe it's a bias looking back the way, but I didn't expect Arsenal to be as good as they were in this round, just purely because of everything we've said. If they can't do anything in the Champions League when they've got the first Wenger team or the Invincibles team, then this team, which is kind of on its downward spiral, Henry's maybe looking at moving on. Bergkamp is well over the hill at this point. Vieira gone as well. I think it is Overmars away as well. It's only natural to sort of assume in my head that they're on a bit of a downward turn. So it probably was a bit of a surprise, if I'm honest. In terms of what they're doing, it's one of these things. You look at this and you think, in that summer, okay, they're making some interesting things. They're investing in youth, and I think that is fine, and that's something that you want clubs to do. And we'll come on to this whole Wenger downfall thing. And I think it is just that. It's fine to invest in youth, but what they didn't do, because they couldn't afford to do, is invest in the new core or the new senior players. Again, I mentioned that defensive midfielder thing. Arsenal didn't have a defensive midfielder until probably from runabout Gilberto Silva up until Declan Rice coming in. To be honest, it felt like there was just a spell for, what is that, 15 years that they weren't one there, and that to me sums up. They invested in younger players, which is fine. They had the stadium build as well, that obviously impacted them much more than it would impact clubs now, just because again of that big shift in finances that's coming shortly. They tried to get ahead of the game, didn't they, and say this is the thing that's going to make us stand out from the rest. This is the thing that's going to make us self-sustainable. We're going to get much more money in than we ever did at Highbury, and all those things were true. But then you just wonder if they had just held off and done it maybe 10 years later, they wouldn't have had half the amount of issues that they have with the TV money blown up and Champions League revenues and foreign investments and all that sort of stuff. They probably could have eked out another 5 or 6 years at the golden age, and who knows, they could have set themselves up to go on and dominate. But as it is, this is the peak. So it's a bit of a shame for me. It's one of those ones you think it would have been good if they won it, and that would have signed off that era, and who knows where it would have went from there. But yeah, I think those are some unfortunate points. But take nothing away from them in this season, and certainly in this group, they did not look stressed at all. So yeah, one of those ones that kind of straddles two generations, I would say. And this is ultimately as good as it gets.
You know what's really interesting about Arsenal in this season is that I associate this era of Arsenal with moving towards, the beautiful football. They'd always been capable of playing nice football, but, the really intricate stuff and whatnot. This is built, they don't score a lot of goals throughout this campaign, but they concede so few. They absolutely just do not concede goals. They don't concede any in the knockout stage. Through the group stage, they concede 2, and spoiler alert, 2 in the final. But it is built on defence, and that was Sol Campbell, Jens Lehmann sort of era, but also Kolo Touré was played. The Gilberto Silva, who you mentioned, was there, and for people of this parish, the defender behind Sol Campbell, who played the most matches that season, was a young Swiss defender called Philippe Senderos.
Yeah, he was good at one point.
It was, and he was the other. He was swapped about with Johan Giroud, the other young Swiss defender, who I think they both went on to get over 100 caps for Switzerland. But this is an Arsenal team. They don't savagely beat anyone. I mean, I'll read you the results from the group stage. It's 2-1, 2-1, 2-0, 3-0, 1-0, 0-0. And then we'll do the group stage in a couple of weeks. But these are tight games. Now, these are against massive clubs. Arsenal do not get an easy draw. But this was a campaign. And this was something that we hadn't seen from Arsenal in eras where I think we all think of them as having a much more solid defence in the past 5-6 years before this. Yeah,
Well,
they
look how
had
that
a
was ripped
balance
apart at Wembley, obviously. I mean, really,
constantly,
really, really
torn to bits.
embarrassed too. Yeah.
And yet this particular campaign, their most successful one, Wenger had found the balance, and yet willingly, and we'll talk about this, and Adam mentioned there in the next couple of years, willingly abandoned it. The formula that he'd found after, let's be honest, a few years of Champions League, where I think Arsenal had absolutely shadow boxed to this point in the Champions. I think they'd massively underachieved. I think as a club historically, Arsenal have underachieved in the Champions League, but in this era in particular, and yet he finds it, and he's got this balance, and he rips it up. It's so interesting.
Do you know what is really interesting? I think, spoiler alert, we'll probably cover it on future shows and future Premier League shows that we might do in the future. But it is really interesting because it's not. It is, I guess, predominantly a financial thing, but it's much or equally as much about Wenger being stubborn and railing against modern football, Arab investment, all that sort of stuff. Because you're spot on. The stadium is an impact, but it's I'm going to invest in youth. He always liked that. Way back, even in France as well, with George Weah, people were saying, "Who's that? We're not going to buy him." And he liked that, finding unpolished diamonds and buffing them up. But I think he probably liked the ego boost of it as well. Look at these players that I can find from nowhere, and that's how. So he maybe thought that was his differentiator. That was his thing that made him unique. Fergie had the
I think
man
that's fair.
management and had the he had the man management. He had the history, all that sort of stuff. Chelsea and then Man City coming along have the
Money.
huge amounts of investment.
He
This is
created
my
teams.
yeah.
Yeah, he didn't buy
This is
teams.
my thing.
He created teams, and I think you were spot on there when you said he was the anti-modern football, the anti-football that was being played in this era. He didn't want teams that were as fast. He moves deliberately away from fast, powerful teams to intricate ball players, number 10s, to technically terrific footballers, and
Tiny
a lot.
footballers.
Tiny football, 5'8", 5'9" footballers, great footballers by the way, and capable of competing. But it to me, because he's done pretty much everything, not as often as Ferguson had, but by this stage he's done everything in England, right? He's won the lot multiple times, and you would think then the logical progression is, I will now go on in Champions League, and instead, and it's maybe that the Gallic temperament, although technically he's from Alsace, which is Germany, but pretty much, yeah. But he does go, Mark. We talk a lot on these shows about it's not an art project. He does, rather than going, my next goal is I must win the Champions League, and I have found after years of sort of tinkering and maybe a wee bit by accident, but I've got there. This is the model that got us to final, and we'll talk about the final on another night. Who knows? Although I do think that they came up against the best team in Europe at that point. But he says, no, I'm not bothered about winning that Champions League. I'm not really bothered about winning anything. I'm bothered about how I do it. And he moves into, and it was almost like his appetite for trophies had been sated, and he would rather win one in his own way, win one by this. This is not what Chelsea do. This is not what Manchester United. They'll come roaring back in a couple of years, and they'll do so with a team that is counter-attacking, hard-working, got immense talent up front, right? Of course, but even those three, Ronaldo, Rooney, and Tevez, they'd cover the yards for you. He seemed to say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going to play with. I mean, there were times, Adam, that the Arsenal midfield had 4 number 10s in it in 2006. I mean, it was or 2008 rather, and every summer he would sign a player, and you think, don't they already? When they bought Arshavin, who was brilliant at the time, he was at Zenit and he'd lit up the 2008 Euros. But you think, don't you have Nasri and Rosicky? Aren't these the same player? And yet he was, no, I will get them all and I will fit them in. And I just find it fascinating that, like for Ferguson, it was Champions League now, have to win that. European Cup, that's the be-all and end-all. Yeah, we want to still pick up league, but the be-all and end-all is the Champions League. And most managers, I think, after they've done the domestic thing, go, that's the next. Pep, recently, I've got to get this with City, to complete the set. He doesn't. And I suppose it's almost admirable in a way, but it was so different.
It's a strange quirk that's a reaction to where football was going. It's a reaction to Mourinho, whom at that time they very much did not get on, and it would have been a purist approach. It would have been the ethical approach, in inverted commas, that we will do it this way or not at all. And how ironic that you fast forward to 2010, 2011 certainly, and it's Mourinho, the arch pragmatist, who is becoming a purist in his own distorted way, perhaps, that no, I'm reacting to what's the kind of dominant style. Yeah, reacting against it's all that, and it's people who fight quite a lot. It's usually because they're the same people, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Adam, you mentioned Arsenal investing in youth. I mean, £5 million in Theo Walcott that summer, no less. And people raised their eyebrows the following summer when he went to the World Cup on a work experience holiday, I think. But I think people understood what that investment looked like. There was a lot of hopes around him. You get Adebayor as well, Abu Dhabi. The one I want to just check my memory from you boys is Alexander Hleb, who had an interesting time at Stuttgart. I think he'd shone this 2 seasons before. I think they'd beaten United, and he was maybe Adam brought in as someone who's going to pull the strings in there, perhaps again. Someone with finesse and a bit of culture around him, and maybe this is a sign of things to come. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he would fall into the same category that David mentioned earlier on, with Nasri, Rizuki, Arshavin, flighty, capable of good points, but yeah, is he really what we're looking for? I think
it literally did not work when it was wet in Stoke. I mean,
no,
they were the definitive proof of that. Hleb was a very clever player. He was excellent, and he was kind of what I would call modern in the sense that he was press resistant. He could take the ball tight and turn and get you away, kind of thing. He was, and he goes to Barcelona, which clearly you don't do if you are a not particularly good football player. But they were all good footballers. It was just balance, wasn't it, Adam?
It was just balance. I think that's spot on. You think about some of those players that will leave. I know we are talking about 05, 06. I'm conscious not talking about 06, 07, but that decision that he makes, where most clubs would think I got to that final.
I'm so close.
Yeah, we're on the right track. We're on the right track. Yeah, exactly. Which we'll talk about. Yeah, absolutely. It's plenty of time to look into the mind of Arsene Wenger and how that was different from the manager that changed English football, absolutely, without question, and for the better. Let's get on, because it's nearly 40 minutes. We've done two groups. Group C, Barcelona, another team cruising to the finish line with 16 points. We absolutely will talk about them, Adam, maybe over the next couple of weeks, and just how they are shaping up under Rijkaard and on the way to glory. Panathinaikos, our trusty friends from Greece, are at the bottom of the group on 4, but it's the two teams right in the middle, both on 7 points, Werder Bremen and Udinese, that are kind of battling out for the second spot on who's going to go to UEFA Cup. It's Bremen that do it. We haven't seen them for a bit, I don't think. Miroslav Klose is there these days. Adam, what are Werder Bremen doing in 2005, 2006?
So this is their high point. I think it's maybe been a while since we've had a kind of surprise package, if you like. And we've got, I was going to say we've got two here.
We'll talk about Udi in
Villarreal.
a minute, yeah. Oh, sorry, you
Well,
talking
no,
about
so
Udi, John.
I was going to say Villarreal are a surprise at this point, but their longevity now is ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're probably, I think, pound for pound over the last 20 years, the team that is punished more consistently above their weight than anyone else. But Bremen had a really, really good run round about this time. I think there's 4 years or so here. The coach is Thomas Schaaf, who is one of those one club guys. Played for Bremen. Made, I don't know, 400 appearances for them. I think he was there for 20 years. One club guy, as I said, and then left a couple of years managing the reserves, and then managed Bremen themselves for 14 years after that. Again, one of those strange guys that just sort of disappears. 2013, he stopped being manager of Bremen, kicked about Frankfurt for 1 year and Hanover for 1 year, and then just gave it in. Really, just if I'm not going to be the Werder Bremen manager, I'm kind of not interested. I think was a thing. So very much one of those guys. Really interesting team. Like I said, they had Miroslav Klose. I think you mentioned earlier on up front. This is before Diego comes. I think Diego joins potentially 2006, maybe the January after. A really good, solid German team. I think guys like Naldo, Tim Wiese, who's the goalkeeper that went on to be a wrestler, I think. Tim Borowski, left-footed central midfielder that I always thought was quite tidy. Aaron Hunt, Johan McCood kicking about. Their
Good
real
player.
strength for me was central midfield, where they had Torsten Frings and Eureka Vranjes, who both of them are the definition of no nonsense. So they were, they're really solid and compact. Maybe typically German at this time before the sort of
Mm.
rise of gegenpressing and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, really well balanced. Lots of goals with Klose. Even Klasnich is there as well, who'd scored a barrel of goals the year before. But they're definitely in their high point at this point. And just to give you maybe wee bit of an example. They won the Bundesliga 2003, 2004, and then the next few years, of which we're right in the middle, they finished second twice and third twice, leading up to the year that we beat them in the Europa League group. Rangers beat them in the Europa League knockout stages. And then they sort of dropped off after that, which I'm sure has nothing to do with us. But yeah,
Absolute coincidence. Yeah.
so yeah, just 46 years where they've bounced about a little bit in the Champions League, not really threatening anything. So I thought it was an interesting time to highlight them. Their style, kind of very much as you would expect at the time. It's maybe a 4-2-3-1 / 4-4-2 diamond, depending on who was available. Closer, lots and lots of goals. I really don't remember. I remember Closer just exploding onto the scene in internationally, but it wasn't something that I really paid much attention to domestically. I'm not sure why I'm surprised to see that he was scoring bucket loads of goals for them, because that was what he did. Sorry, he is undoubtedly their star. And I think this group, Martin, the two of them that you mentioned, it kind of became one of those groups where it's who can lose by the least amount of goals to Barcelona, and then who can score the most against Panathinaikos. It was a bit of a
Aye,
strange,
kind of that, because
strange
Bremen were on 1 point after 3 games. That is not a great start to a Champions League
No.
group. They would lose another, of course, to Barcelona, but that point came in Udine. They then beat Udinese in that flip in the middle at home, a 4-3, and then they would utterly eviscerate Panathinaikos on the last match day to just about, as you say, squeak through into that second spot. David, on Udinese, because I don't know, it's a club I always quite like to see popping up in any of these kind of things. Tony Christmas, Quinta, and all of that. They had it in their hands, didn't they? And they just slipped out the grasp.
just slipped away at the end. Utd are a small club, and people sometimes forget that. The Pozzo family also own Watford, which is, you'd be surprised / not surprised if you look at the amount of players over the years, Martin, who have got Watford and Udinese on their
Pure
Wikipedia
coincidence.
entry. Just coincidence, I'm sure. But they do occasionally produce some outstanding footballers, Di Natale being the most famous of them. But this was a good side, and I think you nailed it with, right, we're not going to beat them, but let's not get scudded, and then we'll see how we go in the rest of it. And it did have that little bit of competition. I would venture that I thought lack of European experience in general here hurts Udinese, not just Champions League. Werder are a club who've been around Europe, plenty. Not for a while now, as we record this in 2024, but I do wonder about that, if it's just that mentality, because we've mentioned a lot. I still maintain you need to learn how to play this tournament. Even the richer clubs need to learn how to play this tournament, the effect that it has on you domestically, etc. But it was tight. Unlike the next group, where we're going to talk about, which is still all these years later staggers me. But we'll get to that.
Let's get to it right now.
Oof.
Group D. Again, the winners.
That's
of the
cruel,
group.
Adam. Rob listens to this.
The winners.
He's our
Sorry,
mate.
He is. Rob has been on, as you know, to talk about some of United's glory nights. I think he actually did request to come and do this because he's like that. Sometimes the interest is in where it all goes very, very wrong. Now, Manchester United at the halfway stage of this group were top.
Yes.
1 win, 2 draws, in a group with Villarreal, Benfica, and Lille. And they somehow contrived to finish the group 3 match weeks later, bottom of the group. Now, this was, again, Adam, we'll go on to Villarreal and a decent Benfica team, actually, maybe, definitely over the coming weeks. This was stunning, and it started quite a few opinion pieces, a few columns, a chat, really, that it's nearly 20 years now. And that's probably time, good a time as any, to bow out before this gets quite sad. No one obviously knew they'd be champions of England the following year, champions of Europe the next year, and 3 in a row, shortly after. This is the point that people are genuinely talking. I'll go to you, David, because you might remember this a wee bit more
This was seismic.
than Adam, but it really felt that, well, time's up. Fergie
This is
time's
done,
up.
yeah. This season really did. You mentioned there, and it's impossible to talk about Manchester United 2004 to 2006, I think, without the spectre in West London that is looming over them. He looks young, he looks dynamic, he's got the confidence that Ferguson had, he handles the press in a more charming way, but he's a total boss of them, which was always a thing about Ferguson. And his team are just miles ahead. At the end of this season, they go to Old Trafford and smash them again, 3-0. And United look a shadow. Now, to put in context of modern Manchester United, this season where everyone is talking, as you say, Martin, whispering about it was time for him to go, he wins the League Cup and finishes second. So, by modern Man United standards, post-Ferguson, that would be a terrific season. But they looked clapped out compared to this vibrant, exciting Chelsea team. But this group stage is still, you mentioned there how shocking it was. It led the, I remember this, it led the bulletins on the news shows, on News at 10, and the next day in the breakfast shows. Not sports, it led the news. Manchester United don't get out the group stage. That's how shocking and big that it was. And there's a simple reason for it. They score 3 goals in 6 matches.
Yeah, it's dried up. And there's another. You're talking about news stories and narratives. There's another issue, Adam, right in the middle of that conclusion to the group stage. They lose a player, and it's not just any player, and it's not just in any quiet circumstance. It's Roy Keane. It's with a huge noise and a huge cloud, and I don't think it's. You can't underestimate, I don't think. Even though he's coming to the end of his career, of course, but it's still a huge presence, and that has to rock any team. Now, I think United brought Van der Sar in, so Ferguson completes his goalkeeping issue, which has been a problem now for years. I think Ji-sung Park comes in that summer as well.
They only
Maybe
concede
one for the future.
In fairness, I should point out that although they only score 3, they only concede 4. So, that side of the team he has.
Yeah. But where this goes wrong, Adam, this Champions League exit is off the back of Keane's exit. I think they make 2 brilliant signings in the January, Vidic, Evra.
Yeah.
Which are going to be a huge part of what they're going to go on to do. But I can understand why football writers looking for a real attractive tag say, well, that means it's just the end of an era. Keane's gone, the place is in crisis. It's time to wrap it up.
Yeah, so there's a few things for me there. Going back to the summer of 2002, even was the last time it really felt to me that he was splashing in the market to try and evolve the team or start a new generation, if you like. And to be fair, that wasn't great. That summer it was Diego Forlan and Varane. Van Nistelrooy comes in as well, which and Blanc, which are obviously great signings. But I mean, the amount of stick that they got for Forlan and Varane was unbearable, to be honest. So, but then you think after that, and it's Rio Ferdinand comes in, Cristiano Ronaldo comes in the year after, Wayne Rooney comes in the year after. Obviously, like terrific footballers, but it's like one player coming in and 3 leaving, and then another player coming in and 3 leaving. So it's yeah, I think there's a little bit of that there. I'm not quite sure what he was thinking round about this time, even going into 2003, 2004. You've got a couple of players coming in, like I said, Ronaldo, Luis Saha comes in who does okay, Heinze comes in who maybe does okay, but there's money being spent. Kleberson, Jemba, David Bailey on, Dong Fanzu coming from China that is a bit punty, a bit almost like not what Wenger would go on to do, but you could sort of see some of that there. It's like I'm going to be investing in youth and I'll try and mould them, and it never really quite works. So I don't know if that was the approach at that time. I can't remember, but there isn't a lot of money being spent on what you would class as players that are going to take them on to the next level. And it's sort of similar the year after. I think Piqué comes in, doesn't he? That year that Rooney comes in, and Giuseppe Rossi. So in a way, it's like, okay, you're not investing, you're getting return because you've got this great manager and you've got some of these great players, but there comes a point where it falls off the cliff. And you mentioned obviously Roy Keane leaving, Gary Neville retiring, and these are the players that are being replaced. So I think there's a lot of mistakes in there. The one thing I would say is this group is just an absolute freak because
it is
5-0-0s in the group. Villarreal only scored 3 goals. Villarreal scored 3 goals and they get 10 points.
Aye.
2-1-0 wins, a 1 each draw, and then a couple of draws.
If you're looking for teams really scabbing their way to the last 16, I've got something to tell you soon.
Wait till you hear.
Aye, it's just one of those sort of ridiculous circumstances. Checking coming to roost. Literally, if they'd scored 2 other goals, they'd probably end up with fucking 12.
So that's the nuance, right? So that's the nuance.
Yeah,
of course it is. But I just wanted to get over that. No one gave a shit about that. This was
no.
It's over. This force in English football. The manager himself, never mind the club. Right, that time is over. We've got this new guy at Chelsea. They've got all the money, and maybe that's where that reaction is, Adam. Manchester United know that they can't really compete with that kind of investment. So we need to find that value in youth. And Wenger's probably thinking very similar, although in more purist lines. And it's that eagerness, I think, to write an obituary. And
it's the first time, Martin, I felt that he wasn't the main man in English football since United got good. Right, that
he
was the
wasn't.
first time. I didn't feel that with Keegan. I thought, as entertaining as Newcastle were, I still felt Ferguson had his, was the
Number,
bigger
yeah.
name, and it was true. I never felt it with Wenger, as entertaining as his sides were, and brilliant at times his sides were, because Ferguson kept roaring back. In the middle of that great Arsenal era, Man United go 3 in a row and won the league by about 30 points. So I always felt Wenger was capable, but I still thought overall, no, Ferguson is the man. 2006 is the first time I'm thinking, nah, right? You're yesterday's news. Here's the hot new band. We've moved past that now. Grunge is over. We're into Britpop, and that is he kind of felt like that, and it was staggering. I remember Oliver Holt brought out a book. I mean, an actual book, the summer of 2006, saying you're done, go. There's this guy in London who's going to dominate for the next 10 years. And it wasn't outrageous at the time. Now, it looks outrageous and stupid in hindsight. It really does, right? Because he goes away and he does it again. But even by this stage, we're saying, can he build, what is this, his fourth team? It's a staggering level to be able to get up to. But, at this point, as I say, they did do all right. They get 83 points in the league. They win the League Cup. And there's an interesting addition to this one, though. In the League Cup, he doesn't put Van Nistelrooy on. It's a dawdle of a League Cup final. It's Wigan, and they beat them 4-0. Right? And everybody knew they were going to win that game. But Van Nistelrooy is on the bench and he doesn't put him on, and that leads to fallout. And of course, we know what happens when players fall out with Ferguson, and he goes. And I do wonder if there was a little bit at the back of his mind that he thought, where were you in the group stage when you're supposed to be the guy that gets all the goals? But it did look, for the first time in my experience of watching Man United since 1990, where I thought, you are no longer the man. And that was weird. And it was also, as it turned out, wrong.
We'll get to it in due course. Okay, let's pick up the pace a little. Group E, we've seen these teams, and we've spoken about these teams quite a lot, Milan and PSV last time out. They went through ahead of Schalke and Fenerbahce. Schalke, I quite like seeing Schalke there as well. Kevin Kurani, the man born in Rio de Janeiro to a German father of Hungarian background, Panamanian mother, and somehow called Kevin. I do love
After
that.
Kevin Keegan, apparently.
Of course. Milan won 4-0 in Turkey, and Sheva gets all 4. Nicely harking back to our first season that we looked at when Van Basten scored all 4 against PSV, I think, in the San Siro. The more we do this show, I think Shevchenko doesn't quite get the plaudits and the glow that he probably should. And I know we're about to step in terms of individual talent, the greatest era of all time, and just in terms of ridiculous levels of numbers, consistency, ability, we're just about to take a step in there. But I think it blinds us to quite a lot of great things that happen in 03, 02, even to 06. But that's just a wee bit of love for Sheva.
Because of England, mate. It's because in Italy they don't think that way. It's because he had that.
And Italy at this point is descending into utter. It's done. Yeah. It's done as a league that anyone watches or takes seriously.
It's not, and because in England they had that disappointing spell. But I do think but you're right. In the UK, he's a guy that we all say is a good player, but we don't talk about unless someone brings him up.
And I think when a lot of people say he's a good player, I think they still think of that Dynamo Kiev explosion with him and Rebrov. Yeah. But anyway, Group F, It's Leon that take the 16 points, as so many teams are doing with 5 wins and a draw. Real Madrid, plucky Real Madrid, making up the 2 places to go through, and Rosenborg and Olympiacos making up the numbers. Le Guen had left Adam after a few years, and Leon really put the foot down. I mean, they were unlucky, of course, the season before, out in penalties to PSV, but yep, starting to look again very good. That hasn't changed. Almost as if the manager's not the important thing at that club, even though we convinced ourselves very much it's what the manager has done. It's all his fault or all his ability.
Especially when he's replaced with Julio, who has never exactly been dynamic and all those type of things. So, yeah, one of those. I would love Rangers to be in that situation where it didn't really matter who the manager was. We would just go on and do things regardless. Would be nice. But yeah, I digress. Yeah, really tidy team round about this time. I know we gave them a little bit of love last year. Lots and lots of players that will go on and have really good seasons, really good careers. Sorry, quite a few that will make their way to England. Flora Maluda, Jeremy Clement, obviously will come to Rangers. Thiago, Sylvain Wiltord. There's a few in there that are tidy, notwithstanding guys like Eric Abidal and Karim Benzema, who will go on to genuinely be some of the best in the world. So, yeah, a nice little spell for them. You're right. There is just a team in every group just now that dominates. Yeah, Madrid at this point going through their
not a vintage Madrid side, as you'll see in the latter stages. This is a Madrid side that's looking across at Barcelona, this Barcelona revival, and kind of coming to the end of their cycle, the Galacticos period, and it will get worse for Real Madrid before it gets better. This season is not great. They're functional. They're not anywhere near as interesting to watch as they had been previously, but we are a couple of years away from being absolutely humiliated at Anfield and signing that lad for West Ham. What was his name? You know the one that we. Faubert, yeah. And the legendarily brilliant Marca headline, his quote was, "I can't believe I'm here," and their quote was that, and then "Neither can we, Julian." So we are entering, and in the 20-year history of the Champions League, apart from the first few years, probably the only real period where Real Madrid were written off as contenders, and Barcelona are just going to go on, and they never seem to go. You never get the two of them up at the same time, do you? It's a bit like Man United and Liverpool. One of them seems to have to be a bit comedy, and the other are successful.
Yeah, the early Josie years. I mean,
that's the
only Real Madrid did win the title with record points and record goals, and they obviously fought out those semi-finals and blah blah. But I know what you mean. It's
quite rare. That's something that I think's been a bit of a feature, hasn't it? That in my head, I'm thinking, were certain teams as good as history remembers them because they won all these things, or was there great teams but maybe just that lack of competition? I think you need both those Madrid, Barcelona years that you mentioned there, Milan, Juve, in the 90s, Liverpool, Man City, in more recent times. You kind of need that point. You still get people saying Jurgen Klopp should have won more than he won. Not really remembering. Not really remembering those ding dong battles that are going on and how.
Yeah, you're right. Every team needs that rivalry because every Sherlock Holmes needs its Moriarty, and it is true. You just for people to almost recognise the level of achievement that was involved in it. People remember, Manchester United's title win 99, 98, 99, but the year after they romped it by about 30 points. But the Arsenal were really poor. So no, I think that's a great point.
I think and it's a point I will make time and time again. But sport historians have to do better, I think, at explaining that, because anyone could just look at Wikipedia for honours and they won this and they won that they must be the best. And it's the same in team sports, but maybe more relevant in individual sports. A player can just come through who's just physically better, doing things in a different way, technique maybe changes the game, but they're just so far ahead of a pretty fallow period in terms of the game overall, and therefore they absolutely mop up everyone. But there could be players who have to share the honours, but are just playing at a far, far more competitive time, and it's the job of those telling the story, I think, to bring that out, and it's not as simple as, shows your medals kind of thing. It's all about the overall conversation. Group G, yeah, you mentioned earlier, Adam, that famous semi-final of the year before. We get that replayed in the group. Liverpool and Chelsea in with Real Betis and Anderlecht. This is a bit stinky, if truth be told. Liverpool win the group basically because Liverpool and Chelsea draw, and they draw 0-0 twice. But Liverpool basically win the group off the back of Chelsea losing and Betis effectively. Liverpool don't lose, but I'm not sure either side particularly caring too much. Chelsea, huge season the year before, David. They buy Essay in, who I just loved. Wonderful. They spent a lot of money, similar kind of money, 20 plus, on Sean Wright-Phillips, who again at the time would be, was slated for doing great things, a lot of potential around that, but maybe needed a bit more to kick on. But it's difficult when you've broke through and you've won what you've won in that kind of style. But they did win the league, but there's just something of a flatness perhaps at times around this season.
I think that's right, and I think part of it is a hangover. And we just mentioned that United 99 and then the following season. And I do think part of it is when you have the first league title since 1955, Mourinho is in the door, and there is a sort of flatness. They win the league in April the previous year, but then they go out the Champions League to Liverpool in hotly contested circumstances, which we've discussed on the show. But I wonder if that sort of kicked into the following season. Wright-Phillips was one of these signings that English clubs make, and it's understandable because they show up really well in the Premiership. Jack Grealish is an example of it recently, I think. And it's like, is he absolutely what you need, though? Yes, he's exciting and all your fans are happy about it. But for Chelsea, the next step felt like the Champions League. They win the league by 8 points, and that's even with a little bit of a slowdown towards the end of the season. But it can't be new again, can it? It can't be the first time again. And then you have to change your mentality slightly because you don't have that exuberant rush, and they don't play with the exuberance. We were talking about this last week, that that Chelsea team is underrated because people talk about it like it was this defensive side, and I think people confuse they could defend with being defensive. It's not that at all. They were banging them in left, right, and centre throughout that season, and there was an ebullience to them that is hard to replicate in your second season, second season syndrome. But when you look at the transfers, Essien is a fabulous bit of business, and incidentally,
just loved them.
But also proof of how well Leon were doing. Leon bought him for 8 million and sold him for 25, right? I mean, that to your point earlier about a well-run club, but Chelsea got this complete defensive midfielder who could score goals as well. People forget
Great
that
goals.
about him. He got quite a few, but they just didn't seem to have the sizzle that they'd had the previous year, and it has been a breakneck 3 years for Chelsea since the takeover. So it maybe makes sense that there's a little bit of, right, we'll sit down and take stock and then we'll go on. Now, of course, the plan goes awry soon after. But what they did have was that incredibly solid dressing room that you've mentioned before. Martin can manage itself and does frequently over the next few seasons towards plenty of trophies. But yeah, they just weren't quite as sparkly as they had been the previous season, I think.
No, that's probably a fair summation of that, Davey. And yeah, the Liverpool games. Thankfully, we'll not have to cover a Chelsea-Liverpool game until, just check my notes, next season. Good stuff. The final group then, gentlemen. Listen, if you're heart in hand, you'll find plenty of shows around Rangers at this particular moment in time. Drawn with Inter and Art Media Bratislava, of course, who had shocked, delighted, take your pick, everybody in the qualifying, and Porto, fine and storied Champions League team, Adam. And I mean, one win, one defeat, and 4 draws see Rangers through. First Scottish club to make or get out the Champions League group stage, it should be said. This was a big deal. It was done in a very different way. I mean, the Porto game, the 3-2 at Ibrox, was one of those kind of nights that can happen, I suppose. The 2 draws against Bratislava were a disgrace, really. The draw in Porto was not. It was a brilliant bit of character and comeback, and to hold Inter off at home as well. Obviously hoping for result to go the way it did, and that's all well and good. But the job was done. Clearly by this point it was not going to be a great season. The writing, I think, was on the wall in general. Maybe the pressure comes off a little bit with that if a manager knows he's probably going at the end of the season. Players know that as well. Domestic situation has lost its wheels, but we're still fighting in this, and belief takes hold. It was a weird one.
It was a weird one because there's obviously some fortunate aspects of it as well. Like you mentioned, that 3-2 Porto, Rangers were good. Could probably have went either way, I think, if we're being honest about it. The games in the middle for me, you always think that, particularly when you've got Porto just won it a couple of years before, Inter, a big club, despite not having won the Champions League yet. You're wanting those games in the middle to get your points. So Porto, delighted to get the win there. Probably 1-0 away in the San Siro.
Yeah, it's no disgrace.
You're like, fair enough, okay. The draw.
No fans, though, of course.
Of course, yeah. A few hardy souls made it in, but
they did. They dressed up as construction men, security men, high vis, and managed to get them in.
My favourite story is a guy who turned up, a mate of mine who turned up in a Clarkston bowling club blazer with a clipboard and walked up and said UEFA, and the guy just waved him through. That is to travel to Italy with that plan.
It's carrying it off with confidence. If a man looks busy, the only other thing he can possibly do, clipboard's one, kitchen towel over the back, shoulder, and the man has stuff to do. Just let him through, please. There's a few. If you're carrying something big, you must be needed in here. You
must be needed, and you can hear him. You can actually hear him, my pal. If you watch the game back, we weren't actually bad in this group, which is really strange because Rangers were phenomenally bad domestically at this point. Like awful.
This is a shit Rangers team.
A dreadful
Rangers team. It's the team that breaks through.
Yeah,
the other far better teams,
really, isn't it?
And it's unlucky. Lovenkrands is on fire in this. Also, that night against Porto, as Martin mentioned, when, let's be honest, Puzo is allowed to punch the guy into the net by the referee. I don't think in the VAR era that goal would have stood. And this strange record Rangers have against Portuguese sides. It doesn't matter the difference in quality, and we've seen it plenty over the years at Rangers. For some reason, whenever they take on Portuguese opposition, compete at a level that they really, really shouldn't. And that's a long-standing thing. But it's a weird group. It's a weird group stage, this, isn't it? It's the drawiest group stage I think we've done.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, you have to. Fortunate, I guess we get the wins when we get them. Some of the draws are a bit disappointing. We probably could have had a couple of goals, but then you
should have beat Armedia home and away.
Yeah, but you also look at them, and they're the worst ranked team in the league, but they beat Porto in the
I was going
Estadio
to
de
say, Adam,
Dragão, and they get
they win in Porto, right? What's happening there? Is this just the natural deflation champions, but the talisman and some key players have disappeared? You can maybe keep it going for a bit, but eventually that is going to fall to earth. Is that just simply what's happening with Porto this season?
I panicked there and thought you were asking me for a breakdown on
No, not media.
Bratislava.
No.
I did not quite get to that on the old notes. Yeah, I think you're right. Just that sort of natural thing. You lose someone of that magnitude, and you lose all the players. Essentially, they probably wouldn't have been a surprise if they'd done an Ajax from the 10 years before. So in a way, the fact that they have managed to get top dollar for their players and allow them to invest is great. They're sort of moving on and bringing in again some of the players that you hear about for years afterwards. Bruno Alves, Lisandro Lopez, Lucho Gonzalez, all those type of guys. Hugo Almeida are all coming in around about this time. So yeah, I think there is just that element of transition. I guess what helps them is that they are still pretty dominant in the Portuguese league, despite three managers the year before, and Adrian's coming in, winning them the league and getting them the Taça de Portugal. They'd probably be disappointed to go out here in the group stages, but it could be quite close, or it could have been quite close. Like I said, if Porto were probably expecting to go to Bratislava on that last night and win, they're probably expecting Inter to come to Ibrox and win. Neither thing happens. The most crucial goal, I think, of the whole group stage for us is Ross McCormick's and Porto.
Because we'd been battered that night in Porto, and hadn't created anything, and then we get that goal towards the end. And yeah, it was just an exciting break from domestic football, which was going very badly for Rangers. Porto as well are a team who have cycles and understand that. I think Portuguese sides get that their team, when successful, will be broken up. I mean, how many of the players did Mourinho end up taking to Chelsea? I mean, quite a few. I think Manish went there, Ferreira, Carvalho, Deco is strutting his stuff with Barcelona. So I think there's an understanding then that kind of thing will happen. All that said, they should have come through this group. They absolutely should have come through this group.
One Portuguese team is going to cause a wee bit of a ripple in the knockouts. We'll get to that next week. There are some cracking games, some replays effectively from last season as well, and lots to look forward to in the coming weeks. Thank you, Adam.
Cheers, Martin.
Cheers, David.
Thank you, guys.
And until next time, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.